Chapter 12. Joy's room was across the hall from Claudia's. Claudia pushed open her door and fumbled for the light switch. "Help me! Help me!" Joy was shrieking at the top of her lungs. The ceiling light clicked on, revealing Joy sitting up in bed, her skin bright red under a sleeveless nightgown. Her black hair fell in wild tangles around her face. Her features were twisted in horror. Her arms thrashed wildly above her. "Help me! Claudia, help me!" Sophie and Maria burst into the room behind Claudia. "Yuck! Joy, what are those things on your arm?" Sophie screamed. "Help me! Please help me!" The three girls ran to her bed. "Leeches!" Claudia declared. 3 enormous black leeches were stuck to Joy's right arm just below the shoulder. "Get them off! Get them off!" Joy shrieked hysterically. "Joy, calm down!" Maria shouted. "How did they get on you?" Sophie demanded, nearly as hysterical as Joy. "Stop moving around and we'll pull them off," Claudia said, grabbing Joy's shoulder. "Help me! Help!" "Joy, stop thrashing about!" Claudia shouted. "How did leeches get in her bed?" Sophie demanded of Maria. "How should I know?" Maria cried impatiently. Maria grabbed Joy's wrist and held it down to the bed. With a trembling hand, Claudia struggled with the leeches. As Joy cried and shook, Claudia pulled the leeches off one by one and tossed them in a wastebasket. "Ow, I'm bleeding, Joy cried. "The bleeding will stop in a minute," Claudia said, trying to reassure her. Joy's entire body convulsed in a shudder of horror, and then was racked by another. She pulled the sheet up to her chin, shaking violently, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Remember last summer at camp?" Sophie asked Claudia. She squinted at her. She had run into Joy's room without putting on her glasses. "Remember that day Joy was swimming in the lake and got the leech on her leg?" "Stop," Joy pleaded. "Don't remind me." It took all day to calm her down, Claudia thought unhappily. "How did they get in here?" Maria asked angrily. She stared into the wastebasket. "How?" she demanded of no one in particular. "How could leeches get into an upstairs bedroom?" "Someone was in here," Joy cried, wiping away tears with her sheet. "Huh?" Maria acted with surprise. "Someone put them on my arm," Joy cried. "They weren't there when I went to bed. They weren't in the bed. Someone had to bring them in." "How do you know that?" Claudia asked, laying a soothing hand on Joy's heaving shoulder. "Because I checked the bed," Joy told her. "You know how I am about bugs and worms. I pull back the covers and check the bed every night before I get into it." Maria strode to the window and peered out. She became very pale and worried looking. "Who would come in here? Who would put leeches on your arm, Joy? It doesn't make any sense." Joy uttered a low moan. "They're so disgusting. I felt something pinching my arm. They sucked my blood. "Please, Joy, try to calm down," Claudia said softly, her hand still on Joy's shoulder. "You're okay now. You're okay." "Did someone know Joy has a thing about bugs?" Sophie asked. "No one was in here," Maria said firmly, turning away from the window. "No one can get in? You know that, Sophie?" "Then how did leeches get on her arm?" Sophie demanded in a high-pitched voice. Maria shook her head and closed her eyes. Her blonde hair fell loosely over the shoulders of her white nightshirt. She tugged at a strand of hair, pulling it to her mouth and chewing on it as she thought. "There are always lots of bugs in the summer," she said finally, brushing the strand of hair back, talking to herself. "Mice, too, but there's no way leeches could get up here. Leeches don't live in the ocean, so—" Her voice trailed off. "Someone had to stick them on me," Joy declared, only a little calmer. "I'm going to speak to Alfred about this right now," Maria declared. Shaking her head, she strode from the room. Claudia listened to her footsteps pound down the stairs. "This certainly is a mystery," she said to Joy. "Are you feeling a little better?" "Know what I think?" Joy asked, ignoring the question. She pulled herself up straighter against the quilted headboard. "Know what I think? I think Maria invited us here to torture us." "Huh?" Both Claudia and Sophie reacted with surprise. Sophie dropped down onto the edge of the bed and squinted hard at Joy. Sophie was wearing silky striped pajamas. Claudia remained standing next to Joy. "What on earth do you mean?" Sophie demanded. "You heard me," Joy snapped. "These things that are happening here, they can't all be accidents." "Joy, what are you saying?" Claudia demanded. Joy wiped her runny nose with a sheet. "I'm saying that Maria invited us here to torture us," she replied darkly, "because of Allison." "I'm sure Maria doesn't blame us for what happened to Allison," Sophie said, her voice revealing uncertainty. "Let's not get totally paranoid," Claudia said softly. "Paranoid? I'm not paranoid," Joy replied angrily. "Do you really think it was an accident that Maria left you get buried in the sand to fry?" "Yes, I do," Claudia told her. And what about Sophie? Joy asked with a shudder. It was Maria who asked Sophie to touch the electrified gate. Sophie could have been electrocuted, and now me. Leeches stuck to my arm. I'm telling you, Claudia, I'm not paranoid. Shh, Sophie whispered, raising a finger to her lips. They all heard Maria's footsteps in the hall. Maria entered the room, a concerned expression on her face. She swept her hair back over the shoulders of her nightshirt. Alfred is just as baffled as we are, she announced in a low voice. The room fell silent. No one knew what to say next. The high-pitched whistle of crickets drifted in from the open window. Sounds like camp, Claudia thought with a shiver. Sophie yawned loudly. Joy had stopped crying and had pulled the bedspread up to her chin. Let's go back to bed, Maria suggested, frowning. Maybe we'll be able to figure it out in the morning. After saying good night to Joy and making sure she was calm enough to be left alone, Claudia made her way across the hall to her room. Feeling chilled, she pushed the French doors shut. She had started to climb into bed, picturing again the 3 big leeches on Joy's arm, when she realized her mouth was dry. Water, water, she groaned aloud. A glass of cold water from the refrigerator would help a lot, Claudia thought. Walking as silently as possible, so she wouldn't disturb the others, she made her way down the long hall, then crept down the stairs to the kitchen. She stopped in the doorway, surprised to find a dim light on over the long counter. The tile was cool under her bare feet. A shadow moved. Someone else is down here, Claudia realized. Maria, is that you? She whispered. No. She could just make out a tall figure half hidden in the shadows near the back pantry. Daniel, she cried, what are you doing here? Chapter 13. Daniel, how did you get in here? Claudia demanded, her voice a whisper. His dark shadow moved against the wall. Frozen in the doorway, Claudia squinted against the dim light, struggling to see his face. The shadows darkened. No one replied. For a brief moment, the dim light from the counter played over his face. Claudia could see his expression, troubled, frightened. Daniel? She called, taking a few steps toward him and shivering from the cold tile. Hey, wait! But he had vanished silently into the shadows. Daniel? Silence. No footsteps. A door creaked somewhere. A gust of wind set a tree branch tapping at the kitchen window. Claudia could hear her heart pounding as she continued to search for him in the shadowy kitchen. But he was gone. Why didn't he answer me, she wondered. Why didn't he say anything? Why did he look so frightened? He isn't a ghost, she said aloud. He can't be. I touched him. I kissed him. But then how had he gotten into the house? How had he gotten past the electrified fence? Oh, Claudia cried out as the bright ceiling lights clicked on. Hello? A voice said. Claudia spun around to see Alfred, dressed in dark trousers and an undershirt, his suspenders drooping down at his sides. Alfred seemed as startled to see her as Claudia was to see him. Oh, hi, Claudia managed to choke out. I came down for a glass of water. Alfred nodded. Me too. I'll get some for both of us. He pulled open a big refrigerator and squinted for a long time at the top shelf. Finally, he reached for a bottle of water. I saw someone, Claudia stammered. What did you say? He turned to her, the refrigerator door still open. I saw someone in here, in the kitchen, a boy. He narrowed his eyes at her suspiciously. Are you sure? Yes, she insisted, leaning against a counter on one elbow, her hands clasped at her waist. Yes, it was dark, but I saw him. I recognized him. But that's impossible, Alfred said, scratching his bald head. He set down the bottle of water and pushed the refrigerator door shut, keeping his eyes on Claudia. No one could get in here. Is someone else staying here, maybe? Claudia asked. Alfred shook his head. No one else. There's no one in the guest house? I thought I saw a light in there last night, Claudia said. A light? He tilted his head, staring intently at her. That's impossible, miss. I cleaned the guest house today. Dusted and vacuumed it. I clean it every week. It's empty, completely empty. No sign of anyone being in there. But I saw this boy's face, Claudia insisted heatedly. His name is Daniel. I saw him at the boardwalk tonight. How would some strange boy get in here? Alfred interrupted. Still scratching his head, he crossed the room and peered out the window, squinting hard. The electrified fence is on. The guard dog has been let out of his pen. Miss Drexel changed the alarm system code herself this evening. Maria changed the alarm system? Claudia asked. Alfred nodded. Yes, she did. There's no way a boy could go through all that without our knowing. Oh, Claudia replied flatly and let out a long breath. Alfred poured out 2 glasses of water and handed her one. He seemed to be uncomfortable, and his eyes avoided hers. Is he hiding something? Claudia wondered. Does he know more than he's saying? And then, as she sipped the cold water, a frightening thought flashed into her mind. Was Daniel upstairs? Had he put the leeches on Joy's arm? Why? The next morning, after a restless sleep, Claudia hurried down to breakfast. She couldn't wait to tell the others about seeing Daniel in the kitchen. Sophie teased her. "The ghost boy," she cried. "Come on, Claude. Now you're seeing ghosts in the house?" Sophie started to laugh, but stopped when she saw the serious expressions on everyone's faces. "Someone came up to my room with those leeches," Joy said with a shudder. "That was no accident. Maybe it was this boy Claudia saw." "He seemed like a nice guy," Claudia told them, "but—" Maria interrupted by jumping up from the table. "I don't believe in ghosts. If there is some boy hiding in this house, I want to find him," she declared, frowning. She started toward the kitchen. At the doorway, she turned back to her guests. "I'm going to have Alfred call the police," she said. "I want them to search the estate from top to bottom. They can do it while we're out water skiing this afternoon." Shouting for Alfred, she disappeared from the room. Claudia had looked forward to water skiing, but with her face still scarlet and starting to peel, she decided she'd better protect her skin more than she normally would. First, she covered herself in number 30 sunblock. Then she changed into an iridescent blue one-piece bathing suit. Over her suit, she pulled on a pair of light drawstring pants and a long-sleeve t-shirt. She topped the outfit off with one of her brother's baseball caps that her mother had insisted she take. "There," she thought with satisfaction. "I look like a total jerk, but the sun won't get near me." By the time she reached the Drexel's dock, the other 3 girls were already in the boat, wearing bright orange flotation belts. Maria was perched up front at the wheel, Joy in the back in a spotter's position, and Sophie hanging over the side, running her hand through the water. "Well, Claudia, you're going to melt," Maria predicted, as Claudia stepped onto the deck. "Probably," Claudia agreed as she strapped a lifebelt on over her t-shirt. A cool wind played over the water, but the sun beamed down hot and strong from a cloudless sky. Waves lapped quietly at the dock. The boat rocked gently, pulling against its line. "Who wants to ski first?" Maria asked. "I'll go," Sophie volunteered, raising her hand as if she were in school. Maria and Joy both showed their surprise. "You're the one who never liked to water ski," Joy said. "Weren't you the one who didn't believe in getting in water that was colder than your body temperature?" Maria teased. "I've changed," Sophie assured them. "I'm a much stronger swimmer than I used to be. Ever since I found out I was a Pisces and water was my sign, I've had a much better relationship with swimming. You'll see, I've become a great swimmer. I'm a fish, really." It was a typical Sophie explanation, Claudia thought with a smile. Next, Sophie would probably discover she'd been an eagle in a past life, and she was meant for hang gliding. "Do you want a dock start or a water start?" Maria asked Sophie. "Water," Sophie said. "I'm a little out of practice." "Okay," Maria said. "Just one thing, if you go down, hold up your right arm to let us know you're okay." "No problem," Sophie said. She climbed out of the boat and sat on the edge of the dock to put on the long skis. Claudia helped her tighten them, checking that they were on properly. Sophie swung her legs around so that the skis were out over the side. Then she pushed herself off the dock, squealing as her body hit the cold water. Claudia untied the boat from the dock and jumped in. The motor started with a pleasant roar. Maria pulled the boat out a short distance from the dock, and Joy threw Sophie to tow line. Slowly, Maria took the boat out until the line was drawn taut. Claudia could see that Sophie had her knees drawn up in a perfect position, the tips of the skis above the water, the wooden handle of the tow rope between her legs. "Ready?" Maria called back. Sophie nodded to Joy at the back of the boat, who called to Maria, "Ready!" After a moment's hesitation, the boat shot forward, its bottom slapping against the dark green swells. Claudia's eyes were riveted on the back of the boat, where Sophie stood up smoothly, then bounced across the glassy waves, perfectly balanced on her skis. "She has improved," Joy cried out over the roar of the motor. "For sure," Claudia agreed, watching Sophie confidently release one hand from the rope and wave at them. Maria swung the boat in a wide arc, and Sophie leaned into the curve, laughing and happy. Her short, fuzzy hair bobbed freely. Watching her friend, Claudia could feel herself getting impatient for her own turn. As if reading her thoughts, Joy called, "Do you want to go next?" Claudia nodded. She hurriedly took off the baseball cap and then the flotation belt so that she could remove her pants and t-shirt. "I can't wait to get into the water," she thought. "I'm sweating to death under all these clothes." She peeled off her t-shirt and pants and was reaching for the flotation belt again when she heard Joy's cry over the noise of the motor. "Maria, stop! Sophie's gone down." Claudia turned her eyes quickly to the water. Sophie was definitely down. She watched for Sophie's right arm to shoot up, the signal that she was okay. No signal. Squinting hard and shielding her eyes from the sun, Claudia saw something bob to the top of the waves. Sophie? Claudia felt her throat tighten as she realized it was a ski. One lone ski. Where is she? Joy shouted. There, Claudia cried, pointing as she spotted Sophie's head float to the surface. As Claudia was pointing, Sophie sank again and then resurfaced, flailing her arms and legs frantically. Maria, turn the boat around, Claudia screamed. Sophie's in trouble. She must be caught in a riptide. It's taking her out to sea, Joy cried, her eyes wide with horror. Claudia gasped at the sudden silence. The boat slowed, then drifted with the waves. She could see Sophie kicking and thrashing, struggling desperately to free herself from the powerful current. Maria, go after her, Claudia screamed in a shrill voice choked with fear. I can't, Maria shouted back, her hands frantically working over the controls. The boat? It's stalled out? It won't move? Chapter 14. Sophie's drowning, Joy shrieked, leaning over the side of the boat, shielding her eyes with one hand from the glare of the sun. Maria, do something. It won't start, Maria shouted, both hands stabbing wildly at the controls. What can I do? What can I do? The boat bobbed helplessly on the rocking waves. Claudia saw Sophie struggling frantically as the powerful current swept her farther and farther away. What can I do? What can I do? The panic in Maria's voice spurred Claudia to action. Without realizing what she was doing, Claudia dove over the side of the boat. The shock of the cold water made her gasp. Choking, she rose to the surface. My flotation belt, she thought. It's still in the boat. The sun made the rolling waves sparkle all around her. Spinning around, she searched for Sophie. Where are you? Where are you? Her heart pounding, she finally spotted Sophie in the near distance and saw her arms still flailing wildly. Taking a deep breath, Claudia began swimming toward her with a strong, steady crawl, moving against the pull of the waves. She knew she had to stay parallel to the riptide without getting caught in it. Sophie's head went under. Then, a few seconds later, it appeared on the diamond-like surface again. Sophie, I'm coming, Claudia shouted, but the wind and the waves blew her voice back behind her. Sophie! She tried to swim faster, but the current was pulling hard the opposite way. Maria, where are you? Maria, please hurry, she said frantically to herself. She listened for the roar of the boat motor as it caught, but the only sound she could hear were the steady wash of the waves and her labored breathing as she pulled herself through the water. Glancing back over her shoulder, Claudia could see the boat bobbing silently far behind her. Maria, please! How could a boat just stall out like that? Claudia's shoulders began to ache. She cried out as a cramp shot up her right leg. Her eyes burning from the salt water, she squinted hard, searching for Sophie. Where are you? Where are you, Sophie? Keep swimming. Keep struggling. Yes. Claudia could see her up ahead. I'm coming, Sophie. Claudia suddenly realized that she was swimming much faster, gliding easily now over the tossing waves. The leg cramp eased. She seemed to be moving with the current now instead of against it. With the current. The current. To her horror, Claudia realized she had swum into the riptide. No, please! She was caught. Caught in the powerful rush of current. Helpless. Being swept away. Out to sea. Chapter 15. I'm going to drown, Claudia realized. The thought made her spin around to search frantically for the boat. Maria, where are you? She couldn't see the boat anywhere. A tall wave rose over her, tossing her forward. She gasped and started to choke again. She could feel herself being pulled under the surface. I'm sorry, Sophie. I tried. I'm so sorry. Her arms throbbed as she struggled to pull herself free from the current. Her leg cramp returned, shooting paralyzing pain up the length of her right side. I'm going to drown now, she thought, gasping out a sob. I'm going to die. The wash of the water became a loud hum. The hum became a roar. I'm sinking, Claudia thought, sinking into the roar. Her arms were too heavy to stroke now. Her legs ached with shooting pains. She could feel herself sinking into the deafening roar. And then, unexpectedly, hands were circling her arms. She felt strong hands grasp onto her and pull. That roar wasn't inside her head. The roar was the sound of a motor, a boat's motor, and she was being lifted out of the water. Two people were working to lift her, to pull her onto the boat, besides Sophie. Sophie smiled at her, trembling all over, her entire body shivering and dripping wet and covered with goosebumps. Sophie had her arms crossed in front of her, and was smiling at her. Are you okay? Claudia, are you okay? Another voice, not Sophie's, asked. Claudia stared up into the worried face, tried to focus on the dark hair tossed in a strong ocean wind, tried to focus on the dark eyes. Carl! She cried. Carl and Dean to the rescue, he said quietly, a smile forming on his tanned face. Claudia turned to see Dean at the wheel. She rolled onto her knees on the deck of the boat, her wet, auburn hair falling over her face. She pushed the hair back with a trembling hand. Sophie, are you okay? Sophie nodded. Yeah, I just can't stop shaking. Close one, Claudia managed to mutter. We'll take you back to the Drexel's dock, Carl said, his hand warm on her shoulder. Claudia nearly toppled backward as a small boat roared forward. She struggled to keep her balance. Wiping water from her eyes, she saw that they were in a small fiberglass powerboat. She searched the horizon for Maria's boat but didn't see it. The tiny boat roared loudly, bouncing over the waves. Claudia scooted close to Sophie. What happened? She shouted. Did you let go of the rope? I don't know, Sophie told her, still shivering despite the hot sun that burned down directly above them. 1 minute I was up, the next I was down. I was still holding onto the bar, but the tow rope? I don't know. I wasn't connected to the boat anymore. I don't know what happened, Claudia. I got caught in the riptide, and... Claudia wrapped a comforting arm around Sophie's trembling shoulders. She could see the white dock up ahead. We're okay, she thought. We're okay. Claudia's legs were shaking as Carl and Dean helped her onto the dock a few moments later. Sophie offered both boys a relieved smile as they pulled her from the boat. You guys are my heroes, she told them. Hey, we do this all the time, Dean told her, grinning. The roar of another boat's engine made them all turn toward the water. Maria and Joy were both waving wildly as Maria's boat bounced up to the dock. A few seconds later, Joy leapt off the boat and, shrieking happily, came running over to throw her arms around Sophie and Claudia. Maria tethered her boat, then jumped ashore, a broad smile on her face. I'm so happy, she cried. My stupid boat? I've got to get a new motor. Joy and I saw that you were safe. Then I finally got my motor to turn over. I think I'd flooded it or something. There were more hugs and cries of thanks to the two boys. Carl and Dean tried to act casual, but Claudia could see how pleased they were with themselves. Even Maria thanked them again and again, which seemed to be a special triumph for them. We've got to get the boat back, Carl said finally. We, sort of borrowed it. Everyone laughed. Maybe we'll catch you later, Dean said, smiling at Sophie. Yeah, catch you later, Carl repeated. The four girls watched the boys roar off in a tiny boat. Let's get up to the house, Sophie cried, smiling at Maria. I'm starving. Close calls always make me hungry, too, Joy declared, her arm around Sophie's shoulders. What on earth happened, Sophie? Maria asked, her smile fading. Did you lose your grip on the bar, or what? I don't know, Sophie started, but Claudia interrupted. She had reached into the water and pulled up the end of the nylon tow rope. Look at this, she called to the others. She held up the end of the rope for them to see. Her hand began to tremble as she realized what she had discovered. What are you showing us? Maria asked as the three girls huddled around Claudia. Look at this tow rope, Claudia said softly. It isn't frayed. It didn't tear. Huh? What do you mean, Claude? Joy demanded, bewildered. The rope had to be cut. Look how smooth the end is. It had to be cut so that it would snap under pressure. You mean? Sophie started, raising a hand to her mouth. I mean someone did this deliberately, Claudia said, turning to Maria. Maria tossed back her blonde hair, her blue eyes staring hard at the end of the rope. That's impossible, she said shrilly. My father and I took this boat out water skiing last week. The rope was fine. I really don't think... Maria's mouth dropped open. She turned her gaze to the boat. Whoa, she cried. Hold on a minute. What? Sophie demanded. What are you thinking, Maria? The boy you saw in the kitchen, Claude? I wonder... Daniel? Claudia cried. Why would he cut the tow rope? I have another idea, Maria replied thoughtfully, pointing in the direction the boys had headed. Carl and Dean, they were on the beach yesterday. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they cut the rope. Huh? Joy cried out. How can you accuse them, Maria? Yeah, they saved us, Sophie declared heatedly. We would have drowned, Claudia agreed. Those boys. How did they know to be here? Maria interrupted. Don't you think it was a little too convenient? How did they know just when to come riding in to the rescue? Maria? Sophie started. Maria cut her off. They cut the rope after we left the beach yesterday. Then they probably watched from the point, waiting for someone to start skiing and go down. I'm telling you, Sophie, they did it so they could be heroes. Their showing up like that is just too big a coincidence. No, it isn't, Joy said loudly, her green eyes lighting up. Huh? What do you mean? Maria asked. It wasn't a coincidence, Joy confessed. I told them to come around today. You what? Maria cried, hands on her hips. Can we please get up to the house? Sophie cried. I've got to get changed, and I'm starving. Yeah, let's go, Joy eagerly agreed, starting toward the stairs that led up to the back lawn. Frowning thoughtfully, Maria followed. Only Claudia lingered behind, holding a cut tow rope out of the water, staring at the smooth end. Now I know I'm right, Joy declared, whispering. Right? Right about what? Claudia demanded. It was right after lunch. They were in a dark wood-paneled den, huddled together on an enormous red leather couch. Maria had disappeared to make some phone calls. Across the room, a mounted moose head hung over the red brick fireplace, stared at them with mournful brown eyes. Joy, what are you talking about? Sophie asked, whispering too, her eyes on the den doorway. Joy pushed herself off the couch, crossed the room, and closed the door before replying. She wore a white sleeveless top over white tennis shorts, which emphasized her tan skin. Just what I said before, she whispered, her expression troubled, about the reason for this little Camp Full Moon reunion. Maria brought us here to torture us. She swallowed hard. Maybe even to kill us. Joy, really, you need a reality check, Sophie said, rolling her eyes. She turned to Claudia for support, but Claudia didn't say a thing. Anyone can have a water skiing accident, Sophie insisted. You can't blame Maria. Yes, I can. Claudia was right about the tow rope, Joy continued, tugging at her ponytail. You saw it, Sophie. That rope was cut. But, Joy, and do you really believe that Maria's boat cut out just at the moment that it was needed to rescue you? Joy continued, her nostrils flaring. Do you really believe it stalled out just when you were about to drown? I don't know, Sophie replied, shaking her head. She pushed her wire-rimmed glasses up on her nose, frowning. I'm all right. I'm right. I know I'm right. The leeches on my arm weren't an accident. None of the accidents here have been accidents. Maria has to be responsible. Alfred reported that the police searched and didn't find any trace of Claudia's ghost boy. It has to be Maria. Maria brought us here to torture us. Claudia raised her eyes to Joy's. But why? She demanded. What's her reason, Joy? Why would she want to do that to us? Joy leaned forward, all the light fading from her green eyes. Because, she whispered, Maria must know that Allison's death wasn't an accident.